I'll summarize our vision. We're a forward-thinking community. Again, with our mission, basically to promote a high quality of life, we're collaborative, we're customer focused, and we're continuously improving. And then with our core values, which I really like, we have integrity, we are innovative, we are inclusive, we are compassionate, we are empathetic, and finally, we are ethical. So this is our vision, mission, and core values that we adopted last May, which really sets the framework for our city and ties into our budget. So really excited about the plan. So I'm just going to cover our several of our focus areas. Not going to read all of this. In summary, from our fiscal sustainability standpoint, it's really about effectively managing our resources and creating a stable financial environment. The next focus area, having a safe, healthy, and sustainable community. It's about diverse programs, places, and events, opportunities of learning and recreation, and public safety. The next focus area is innovative and high performance organization. This is all about having an employee first culture and a high performing workforce. Okay, our next focus area is infrastructure. And this is focused on maintaining infrastructure and facilities and having a high quality of life, economic viability, and protecting the environment. And finally, economic growth, quality of life, business investment, supporting technology, and ongoing partnerships in the public and private sector. Those are our focus areas. Okay, the strategies, which I will read, and this really ties into our budget initiatives. Customer focus, improves services to the community and their seamless interaction and accessing of city services. An internal process focus, improves internal processes to enhance operational efficiency and effectiveness. A technology and training focus, improves organizational technology and/or enhances learning and training for staff. Number 4, a financial sustainability focus, reduces costs, enhances revenues, and improves financial transparency, financial reserves, and credit rating. We have 3 more strategies. Our 5th strategy is our community well-being focus. This is really outward, improves community connectivity, safety, health, and well-being. Number 6, economic sustainability focus. It's really a focus on our long-term economic viability of the community through job growth, diversification, economic opportunities, and continuing to support local business opportunities, local business operations, And finally, number 7, an employee focus. Improves and supports the ability to hire and retain diverse, high quality, and talented employees. So really tying into our budget, we're now going to give some examples from our prior budget, our current budget, for 2022-2023, and you'll see why this is meaningful. So let's move forward. So we hired our social service, we put in the budget together with the council, with the support of the community, a social services coordinator. This is a picture of Audrey Culberson and our community resource officer with Lowe's. And here we're actually purchasing a washer and dryer for a local nonprofit to help people in need. And by advancing this social services coordinator, it meets strategies 1 and 5. It's a customer focus and it supports the community well-being focus. By creating a police reorganization and Expanding our community resource officers, we were able to meet 3 strategies, 1, 2, and 5, a customer focus, an internal process focus, and the community well-being focus. So that actually advanced 3 of our strategies. Diversity, equity, inclusion study. This study is ongoing and will be unveiled in a couple of months. This really met our training focus, which is part of our technology and training, and then our employee focus. Our Parks Master Plan, which is also ongoing. And by the way, we have our open house on January 26th from 5 to 7 p.m. coming up in just a couple of weeks. This meets our community well-being focus, strategy 5. And our traffic calming study, which will be complete soon, is ongoing and also meets our community well-being focus, strategy 5. Park improvements and upgrades. We're seeing a number of improvements to our parks. Central Park here, which you see, is going to be improved here in the near future and meets our community well-being focus. Manchester Road, a big economic engine in our community, meets our community well-being focus and our economic sustainability focus. Again, we're improving Manchester Road. And then finally, we had a strategy to strategically increase our fees and explore efficiencies. And this meets our internal process focus and a financial sustainability focus. So this provides some context. You can just run through all of these. This is the list of all of our most of our budget initiatives from the present budget and the strategies that they met or are currently meeting from our 2022-2023 budget initiatives. So the question is, going into our current budget, going into our next budget, which we're now into this process now for the council and for the public, the 2023-2024 budget, we want to try to connect to the strategic plan, try to connect to those 7 strategies that I just outlined. Second, I think it's important to try to consider those 4 ongoing studies yet to be implemented. They're all ongoing. 2 of them are near complete, the diversity, equity, inclusion study and the traffic calming study. The other 2, the ADA study and the Parks Master Plan, will be done about midway through the year. So those studies need to be implemented and will take resources. So I think we need to consider dedicating some resources to those. And it will take multiple years, of course. And then finally, what can we afford? This will be a team effort. We don't quite know what our revenues look like. We won't know for a couple months. April will be a key month in that regard. And we don't quite know what our expenses look like, but we will certainly update the council and the public when we have that full picture. And we'll likely have to prioritize together what we're going to focus in on. But hopefully that provides some context for you all. And now what we're going to do is we're going to hear from our finance director, Lexi Miller, about our budget and an overview of our budget.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
The Parks open house from 5 to 7 on the 26th, is that here?
Yes.
Okay, it's at City Hall?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so this is just a basic overview of the budget process and how it works here. So basically, we start out with each individual department pulls together their anticipated expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year. The city manager actually reviews those budgets with them, making revisions as needed, and the finance director does an estimate of revenues for the upcoming fiscal year. So after we've done all that, those departmental budgets are presented to City Council for review and comment in the public work sessions that we have. Then any changes that are made after those sessions or during those sessions they're made and they're highlighted. And then a final draft budget with noted changes is presented to the council and to the citizens. We have the public hearing, which is held for citizens and council's comments and questions. And we have the ordinance that is read 2 times and then tabled. Then finally, we have the final read of the ordinance. The budget is passed and implemented. This all needs to be done before the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30. If we, for some reason, did not do that, then the current budget that we have would stay in place. So that's why we're always pushing to make sure we get this done by the end of our fiscal year. So this is just kind of some overview of how we budget and how we operate here. So we practice fund accounting. It is a system for keeping track of revenues and expenditures. So many of our revenues are legally restricted and can only be spent as regulated by law. For example, the parks and stormwater taxes are spent on parks and stormwater. So in order to make sure that happens, we keep track of it in a separate fund. And so all revenues and expenditures come out of that fund. So that way we know we're only spending parks money on parks. We also practice modified accrual accounting, which is an attempt to match revenues and expenditures to the time period in which they occur. So for example, our fiscal year ends June 30th. We collect sales taxes, right? We sell stuff through June, but we don't actually receive those from the state until August. So those sales taxes that we receive in August are actually they're actually credited to show as actually received in the time period when those sales were made. Same with an expense if we take a car into the shop to get fixed in June. We won't receive that bill probably until sometime in July. We go ahead and we account for that to be credited towards the year when the expense was actually incurred, when the repair was made. So that would be in the June 30, in the prior year. So that's kind of how modified accrual accounting works. We have several funds. The first one is the general fund. It's our chief operating fund. It's the only fund that can have unrestricted net assets, meaning that there are no restrictions placed on the use or the function. So these funds can be used for anything that we choose. We also have, you can have like a pet capital projects fund, which we do. And this is the HAPCENT Capital Improvement Fund. It's used for capital purchases, including street construction and building renovations. And then we have debt service funds. And so those are used to keep track of debt-related revenue and expenditures. So when we receive taxes related to a special TIF taxing district, we record the revenue in these funds. And when we pay the debt related to these debts, we record the expenses in those funds. In this way, only the designated revenue is used to pay off that designated debt. And some example of the debt service funds would be like the Deer Creek TIF, the Hanley Road TIF, including also like the Firehouse Bond Project. So those are all debt service funds. And then finally, we have special revenue funds. And so these are funds that are established to keep track of revenues that are restricted to a specific purpose, and they're non-general revenues. So examples of this would be special business district, park stormwater, sewer lateral fund, forfeiture fund, the fire sales tax fund, and then of course solid waste fund. So all of those we have to track both the revenue and expenditures to make sure that they're only spent for those purposes because they are special revenue. Okay, so all of that being said, this is a page out of our current budget book, and it just shows the general fund revenues. So when we prepared the budget, we always include what the actual is. So this time last year, we said the actual for revenues for fiscal year 2020, 2021, were that first column. Then where it says current 2021, 22 is what we expected it to be for the current year that we were in, 21, 22. And then we budget what we expect the revenues to be for the current year we're in now, which is 22, 23. So as you can see, there are changes in expenditures and revenues. The reason why we have more revenues between 2020 and 2020, 21 and 2021, 22, a lot of that's going to be COVID, and then starting to receive some COVID, ARPA funds and other supplemental funds from the government for COVID relief. So as you can see, we did not anticipate a large increase in revenues in the general fund for the current fiscal year that we're in. We think we've kind of reached that level where we've kind of rebounded. So, okay, then this is the total, the revenues for all the other funds. So all the special revenue funds, debt service funds, capital funds. Again, we do have a little bit more revenue in this fiscal year for fiscal year 2022, 2023. A lot of that has to do with the HACCP capital for streets. It's because we are receiving grants for the Manchester Road Overlay Project. So that's a reimbursement project. And so we recognize those grants that we're anticipating receiving. So all of that being said, when you look at this pie chart, you can see that, you know, the majority of our revenues are sales taxes. They make up about 42% of our sales taxes. We do have about 18% of our revenues are gross receipts, utility taxes, and those are taxes on utilities for utility sales within the city. And then intergovernmental revenue, which a lot of people don't really understand what that is. That's like state tax revenue received, like for vehicle fees, cigarette tax, fuel tax. So that's what those intergovernmental revenues are. And then also of note, services doesn't even make up 1% of our total budget. And that is like fines for weed cutting, police reports, things like that. So it's a very small portion of our budget. Okay. So now we're going to look at our operating expenses. So these are our general fund operating expenses. As you can see, again, we have the actual for fiscal years 2020, 2021. We have what we had anticipated through June 30, 2022, and that what we budgeted to expend in fiscal year 2022, 2023. And then these are the budgeted expenditures for all the other funds. So the fire, for all the capital, et cetera. And as you can see, like most places, all expenditures go up every year, not necessarily at the same correlation as revenues. So, but it is what happens. So I thought this next slide was really kind of interesting because when you look at the police department, which is our largest personnel department, or that has the most personnel, it's our largest department. It makes up about 44% of our total expenses. The next highest would be the fire department, which is the next largest department. If you include public works in that, which is about 14% of our expenditures, you're looking at about 78% of our total expenses, or over 3/4 of our total expenditures being spent on public safety and public facing services. So it's either public safety or street repair, street maintenance, park maintenance, things like that. So, I mean, most of our budget is spent for outward facing and public facing activities. I just did want to mention the executive department because not everybody knows what's in that department. That would be like the city manager, social services coordinator, the finance department, community development, and then other administrative expenses that are citywide expenses would be under the executive department. Okay, so this graph is kind of important because this graph shows in blue the revenues relative to expenditures, which is the orange line. And as you can see, through fiscal year 2020, 2021, revenues were well below expenditures. And this continued through part of fiscal 2021, 2022. And finally, we surpassed expenditures with revenues in fiscal year 2022, 2023. And this is due to several factors. First of all, COVID reduced the overall sales taxes within the city due to COVID restrictions imposed on businesses and overall needs with the pandemic. Now that we're almost 3 years out from the start of the pandemic, we have seen businesses return to normal, unrestricted operations. And we believe that sales taxes have really fully rebounded, and we aren't expecting them to continue to increase like we had that sharp increase the 1 year. Fire sales tax, we passed the fire sales tax an extra 1/4 cent. And so that also made a significant difference. And so that was reflected in fiscal year 2021, 2022. The city has practiced strict budgeting. The city was very conscientious in preparing the budget for the fiscal year to ensure that expenditures were below revenues. And that was a joint effort by everyone involved. And then finally, the city also has received ARPA funds. So we received ARPA funds in 2021, 2022. We received ARPA funds in 22, 23. That was when we received the second tranche. We will not be receiving any more ARPA funds. So that's where it's not a real big gap and we don't want it to reverse again. While there appears to be a sharp incline in revenues, we do not expect that to continue going forward. While our expenditures are currently under revenues for this fiscal year, going forward, we will need to continue thoughtfully budgeting to continue to have a balanced budget. So, okay, so I promise I'm almost done. So we do have several priority studies impacting our future budgets, as city manager had mentioned. One of them is the diversity, equity, and inclusion study. We also have traffic calming study. We have the ADA study, as well as the Parks Master Plan.
I just want to weigh in here again, just to kind of reinforce. And all these will be multi-year implementation efforts. None of them are complete yet, but the first two, the diversity, equity, inclusion study and traffic calming study, will be done soon and ready to be implemented. And I'm very much in favor of beginning to set aside resources in the upcoming budget for implementation. I think they have support in the public as well. And I think they'll go a long way towards moving our city forward. So I'm looking forward to dedicating as much resources as we can. But obviously it will be a team effort and we'll have to prioritize, but I just want to make those comments. Thank you.
We also have several personnel changes that are going to be impacting future budgets. We fully funded the assistant fire chief position this year, so that will be a position that continues to have benefits associated with it, with the costs that increase. We budgeted for the social services coordinator this year as well. And finally, we had the police work reorganization. So all of those do have a long-term impact year over year, just with benefits and other expenses that are associated.
And just to comment on this slide, it was my first year, my first budget, and listening to council members, the community, these three positions and these three efforts, I think were all equally important to get done in the budget, in the present budget, and their impact is very important and has been important and continue to be. In particular, with the social services coordinator, obviously it's a shared expense with Richmond Heights, so that's great. Having said all that, I do not anticipate any additional personnel expansions in the 2023-2024 budget at this time. So I want to make that point.
Okay, so the last set of or type of fund that we have is a debt service fund. I want to go over those very briefly, I promise. So we have general obligation bonds, and then we also have tax increment financing. So the general obligation bonds, the city issues general obligation bonds. So they are a special real and commercial property tax rate approved by voters to pay off bonds to complete a specific project. So the city actually approved bonds for the construction of the new firehouse, and these bonds are anticipated to mature in 2035. We also have tax increment financing debt service. So an example of that is our Hanley Road Special Allocation Fund. This is for the area along Hanley Road, including Lowe's. These bonds are paid by property and sales taxes, and the bonds should be paid off in 2026. So just in a few more years. We have Cambridge Commons Special Allocation Fund, and this is for the 20-unit single attached housing development at the Old Bruce School. Property taxes are assessed and used to pay for these bonds, and these bonds mature in 2027. We also have the Deer Creek Development Special Allocation Fund, and This was used to redevelop the Deer Creek Shopping Center to revitalize that area after the Kmart store closed in 2001. Property and sales tax are also used to pay off these bonds, and these bonds mature in 2035. So that's just kind of an overview of our debt service. And that is the budget in a nutshell.
Okay, so what we'd like to do now is before we actually go into breakout sessions, which we will have a Zoom breakout session. I'll explain when we get there how this is going to work. And we'll have a breakout session here in council chambers. But before we do that, we'd like to, pardon? Yeah. We'd like to allow the opportunity for the public and council as well to ask any questions about the budget or about the strategic plan, how they might work together. And that can be from Zoom, if you want to raise your hand, or if you want to come up to the podium and ask a question as well, that would be great. And be happy to have a dialogue here. This is interactive. Okay.
So I had a question about the revenues and expenses graph. If you take out the ARPA funds, did our revenues still exceed our expenses? Did we? So no.
No.
Okay.
We're close, but it didn't.
Are there any comments from council members?
Can we go back to the strategic priorities? Because when you were showing what addressed which strategic priorities, I don't think I noticed anything allocate or anything related to number 3. And I was just wondering which one was that?
There is one, because I looked too. All right, so I do know there is one. I just don't remember which one it is. Hold on. So 3 is technology and training. Oh, that's
Yeah, we did have our diversity, equity, inclusion study, which does address training, training component.
there it is.
Yes. But that's a good item. Sure. So we will have a plan for the diversity, equity, inclusion study in March or April. And we will present that before council. And there will be a 5-year plan. Some of those things will cost money and some will not. Very, very excited about that, and we're working through it as we speak. And so yeah, we'll have that in the March, April range. It will definitely be March or April. And then the traffic calming study, I was going to send out an email update, and so I will also do that, but I'll convey this to you now. It's going to take a little bit more time. I thought we were going to have a January or February, which I conveyed to you previously, presentation by CBD. And it's going to take a little bit longer because we need them to, Anthony Traxler and I sat down with them about 2 weeks ago, and we need them to study a couple more areas in some of our neighborhoods that we thought they did not study originally, some high priority areas. So that's probably going to be March or April as well. So both of those will be around the same time. So they will be ready for our budget. They can't be connected to the 2023-2024 budget. So it's still good time for both of those. And it will also be, both of them will be, I don't want to say how long the traffic study, but it'll be a multi-year plan. Definitely a multi-year plan.
I mean, we can't overhaul our traffic flow in 1 year.
Yeah.
Rats. Okay. I don't have a question. Apologies all for my lateness. And Lexi, I want to thank you for your explanation. Every time I've done this, I've learned something new. So thank you for educating us and the public, and thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
This doesn't really do with budget, but well, yes, it does. The calming study, you said there was going to be some new spots in the neighborhood you want to look at. Off the top of your head, do you remember what those are?
Well, one road that I'll name, yes, Councilman Page. One road that they did not look at was Yale, and that's one road we want them to study. So we want data on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there were two others, and I don't remember the other two, but that was one of them. So yeah, so very excited about both of those, and the other ones as well. The Parks Master Plan. The Parks Master Plan will be third, and then the ADA will be the last one to come in, because that hasn't even gotten started yet. So that will get started soon. So if there's no more questions, what I'd like to do next is, if we can pull up we have the budget agenda pulled up, and we are going to I'm going to review the breakout session questions first before we review how the breakout sessions will go. So we have 5 general questions. Well, they're kind of specific, depending on which ones you look at. So we want to make sure that in the breakout sessions that these 5 are covered. You can get into other items as well, because you may have time when we go into those breakout sessions. But these 5 we want to make sure we cover. So number 1, what was informative about last year's budget process, and what needs improvement or clarity? So that's number 1. Number 2, what would help you learn more about the budget? What can we do differently? What would help you learn more about the budget? Number 2. Number 3, what services provided by the city do you value? Number 4, what services need more investment, and contrarily, what need less investment? Number 5, and finally, what would you characterize your value of services for taxes paid? So those are the 5 questions that we want to get addressed. And then feel free if in the time. And we want to spend, it is 6:42 right now. The plan would be to go until either 7:10 or 7:15. What do people think, given the participation we've got? Yeah, I'm thinking let's do 7:10. We'll go until 10 after 7. And we'll then stop at that point in time and report out. And we don't have anybody online right now, is that right? Okay.
No?
No. So I'm going to ask one council member when we break out, obviously it's going to let one council member report out. I don't care which one, but if one of you can kind of report out and summarize. Lexi has volunteered to take notes. And she will take notes. And we'll have one councilman report out. And then after just to summarize the rest of the agenda, we got time. After we report out, then however long that takes, we've got 20 minutes allotted, it might take less. We then will allow for back and forth, additional questions or comments from the public, the folks that are here. And then we'll kind of go into the final next steps and what happens after this and kind of close the meeting. So that's what we got going. So we'll now go into our breakout session, roughly 25 minutes. Okay.
We'll just keep recording. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no reason not to.
Someone else online, then we don't really need to actually break out.
No, but we were prepared to be able to break out.
We're not gonna like split the room in half.
Right, right. But it might be nice for all of us to gather sort of in a circle or over.
I'm gonna move this back down here. More.
We can gather at the table or whatever.
We should all fit around the table, shouldn't we?
A lot of weight, a lot of pressure.
Ward 3 representative, right?
Sarah, do you want to roll one of those chairs down from there so that there's. The principal town hall.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are
I think we're good.
I don't want to just start this way. It's a lot less formal.
I had never sat at this table.
Really?
Yeah,
On an official capacity.
just in general for me.
Yes, you are. Committee meetings and Pepper Scouts. That's not very official.
So,
Hey, guys.
Not very at all.
who wants to run this?
No pressure.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to be here. I think everybody knows everybody else's names. Good, okay.
John Doe.
We don't have to do, I made a different group do an icebreaker, so be careful what you joke about, Sean. All right, so what did you guys like about the budget process? How can we improve this?
Well, that's assuming that you paid attention during last year's.
Oh,
budget process.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I did participate in last year's budget town hall where we did breakout session. We articulated what our priorities were and what we felt we should focus on. And it's really rewarding a year later to see so much of that.
Yeah, because Lexi's first budgetary
No.
process,
Yeah, she wasn't here for the town hall last year.
Yeah, I wasn't
Right.
here for the town hall, but it was my first budget.
first budget.
I would like to say that both of your PowerPoints were very helpful. I really liked, I like that we have strategic priorities now and that you're tying the budget to those. I thought that's really nice.
I did notice a Buffalo nickel and Indian head penny on
And
each
a silver
currency. I
note.
think you could do
Yes.
better next time. I mean, update our.
You know, that's from like the 30s, 34. 35.
I noticed that too. That's like,
That's
what
right.
is that? It's fine. It's currency.
Just in case you don't think we're eagle-eyed about these PowerPoints.
I'd like to see some Bitcoin in future.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Um,
Put any big
You
ones.
can't see it though.
I only do
Sarah.
FTX.
Wait a minute. All right, so,
Comment on this too?
you know what?
Yeah.
I'm steamrolling you guys. It's my bad. So thank you for that.
Sorry.
Not big, council member.
I just want to say that, over the course of the last 5 years budget process, that these last 2 years especially
have been very helpful and very informative and very strategically driven, which I appreciate. So thank you both.
Refreshing, refreshing.
Yes.
Refreshing. The hours I wasted trying to figure it out on my own.
If there's ideas too, I'd just like to, if there's ideas that anyone has about improving participation in this, because,
I will note, I knew a lot of people who were going to attend in November. I think January, especially the beginning of January is rough. And I know it's not, whatever, it's just circumstance, but I think
Sorry.
timing, no, I'm not, but I think timing affects it.
Yeah, I attended last year and I really wanted to be there.
Yeah.
I think that.
Yeah, I think
No, it was, I didn't know it was on
We had
Saturday.
we had like 5 breakouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
was it
Zoom.
on a Saturday?
I think it was a Tuesday. I think it was like an off week Tuesday. I thought it was a weeknight, but time 6 o'clock is hard for people.
We did do
But we might have done something else on the weekend.
we did, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
I thought it was this. I was thinking it was Saturday.
I think it was an off week Tuesday, but
I think we did a Saturday when I first came. Maybe, but yes, okay.
Sorry.
It was a Tuesday.
I think
It was there. The week.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we did something else in the weekend.
Yeah, but I think like we're bringing up a good point about anytime you schedule something, you leave somebody out. And so I don't know if it makes sense at this point to suggest like more than one option just based on
Yeah, that would be
current
nice.
attendance, but thinking broader than like work night, work night, or versus weekend. and that type of thing.
I think having 2 options, I know it's more work for you guys, but like I'm thinking 6 o'clock on a weeknight, if you're a parent and you have kids, that's a terrible time. I don't know.
If you had an elementary school kid, like this was your first day of normalcy.
Yeah,
this year,
right,
so
right.
it
And
was
it's,
like,
yeah, and the month matters too, like, yeah.
Couple
so,
weeks.
yeah.
I think too, a little more messaging around the purpose and objective of the conversation. I know it's hard to put on a yard sign when you're driving by, but maybe the posts on social media could provide a little bit more detail about this being an opportunity to hear from citizens about.
Sure.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about participation, talked a little bit about last year and sort of the change in how we're doing things over the past 5 years, really. What would help you learn more about the budget?
You want to know more.
I'm going to assume by virtue of sitting at this table, everybody wants to learn about the budget.
I mean, I think you guys have already done a lot to help people learn, like those documents weren't even online before, like, and I don't know, I think like summary type things, like your PowerPoint, if that was online or just like dumbed down version, it's a lot of that stuff's kind of complex, but.
I'll put on my school board hat and say something we've been wrestling with is how to tell the story of how tax dollars are used, because there is this impression of a lot of narrative that we're overtaxed in this community, and that potentially our tax dollars are not being used to their greatest benefit. So I think any opportunity you have to illustrate really how little revenue we actually generate from our tax base in that regard, particularly property taxes for the city, it's pretty negligible for you all. As we're thinking about the reason I'm here, housing affordability and stabilization, and really advocating for that. Being able to put forward a strong narrative about how those tax dollars are used can really support the case for why we need to innovate and rethink the way that we're using our resources to support. That was very articulate.
No,
Yeah, it was.
No, telling the story is extremely important. A community like ours, it's as involved and eclectic as it is. People want to know where their money's going, not that they can't afford it. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to know why we're spending the money.
I don't know, it's kind of like a little off topic, but for me, that sort of segues into me understanding, like I asked the question about ARPA funds because, you know, my understanding is our revenues still are really close or don't exceed or slightly exceed our expenses, and expenses are always going to go up, especially when the majority of our general fund dollars have to do with personnel, right? Because every year you have to have an increase. And so for me, what would also be helpful is like, if we want to do these things, like a greater understanding of like how we're looking ahead and how we're planning ahead so that, you know, we're taking it year by year, but like, is there any 5-year plan, 10-year plan, knowing that sales tax, like we can't keep raising sales tax because, I mean, you're taxing, and it's, you know, you're also then affecting the poor in our community, right? Who have to pay it. So like, how are we dealing with the issue that we will always have rising expenses, but our sales tax likely will not rise with.
You want me to, or you want to do it? Yeah, that's a very good question. Only being here, I mean, when I first started last year, I was like, oh, I don't know how we're gonna do that, and I'll figure that out in a little bit. I want to see what our revenues look like this year, because I don't know what a
Right.
normal year in Maplewood looks like. I mean, I could go back like 3 years, but that's a
Right.
completely different animal than where we are today. So looking at revenues this year will give us a better idea of like how close we are. Michael and I have discussed a lot about trying to find more efficiencies in how we do things, because, you know, redundancy and things like that just costs us money. So those are things that we're trying to look at internally and what we do within our departments and how we budget to make sure that we aren't budgeting that way in finding those kinds of efficiencies. So things like that are always really good. I mean, you have to bear in mind, right now, we have 4 studies that we're paying for.
Yeah.
So those 4 studies, when the study is complete, that money can then be used, that we use to pay for the study. Some of that money can be used to do some of the, implement other things. So it's not like, I mean, some things will end, like we said.
No, I mean, I
So-
get that, but it's a general trend.
Oh, it's a general
So,
trend.
I mean, at
Yeah.
some point, you know, the
Yeah.
rubber meets the road and what, you know, I guess the question is like, look, are we, you know, it's just understanding as a community, if we have priorities like housing and things like, and we want to achieve them, you know, at some point, if you always have these rising costs that are set, you know, how do we fund those things? So, and maintain our
My
level of
thought would be
service.
at some point we will have hard decisions.
Yeah.
as to,
That's a
okay,
million
what
dollar
are,
question.
right, what
But
are,
it's understanding when, like, we're
Right.
trying to predict when, because I
Right.
think you could, after you looked at some
Right.
data,
Get some more
could
information.
start to understand that
I
question.
think understanding that revenue curve is important because it's, you know, it's not that they won't, I mean, revenue goes up not just because we increase taxes, but because the cost of things goes up and the amount of things.
Right,
being
I
bought.
get that,
I know you get that,
but-
but I'm just saying, so like
But your
understand.
expenses also corresponding. to that.
Right, so it's hard. I told you that yesterday.
Yeah.
We're just getting finished with our budgeting process and it's so hard to make decisions right now because you have to look back 3 years to find a normal year.
Right,
And so
exactly.
it's,
and then you always have to worry, are we going to go into a recession
Yeah.
or are we good? You just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Are we just gonna plod along and be okay? Or, you know, is there gonna be a recession and
Or we're gonna have another pandemic crushing, you know.
Right, and I know there's there's obviously no definitive answer when
Right.
it comes to this. It's just the idea that we are,
Yeah.
you know, not just going year to year, we're also thinking.
And I think that part of that was part of Michael's plan on having this strategic plan to kind of start looking farther out and, you know, as we have better revenue projections, we can say, you know, we're gonna have to look at things at this point because you know, we're not gonna be able to do whatever because we're gonna have to look at what our numbers are. So,
The other thing is, even though, you know, obviously, we supported 3 sort of personnel expansions in this budget. You know, I made the point about it's likely won't be in this upcoming budget. Because it won't be sustainable.
Right.
That doesn't mean that departments aren't asking for it. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
You know, so they, in particular, one department. But, you know, that's something that I'm very mindful of. In terms of making sure that we're looking at the personnel side of things. That's a good point. Yeah, Lexi and I do spend time regularly thinking long term. Why you're putting out the fires, of course.
it seems to me also that like really managing debt well and not overusing debt is a great way to curb against, you know, the fact that expenses rise and all that.
And I guess tying back to this, sorry, I took a little off course, but it's like letting the public know that you're doing that, because I think, you know, a lot of, you know, just that it's not like we're just, you know, spending, I mean, it goes back to the idea of like, you know, letting people know that we are thinking about that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really know how you do that, but.
And we also, without saying, not trying to say anything negative about my predecessor or anything, but we're in a bad credit situation
Right.
because of using our reserves.
Right.
And we're not doing that anymore. And so we're, you know, we've tried to brag about that without saying bad things about, you know.
For sure.
So, by not using our reserves, that's also looking at long-term growth. You know.
Well, I feel like that's kind of common thread between like what you were saying about, you know, talking about our improved credit standing, what you're talking about with like looking to the future, and what you've mentioned about telling the story of the taxpayers' dollars. It comes back to me with like financial stewardship. And that always contributes to like greater public trust. So the more we share about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, the more people understand and the more people trust what it is we're doing. And so just
And to Jenny's point about, I mean, just dumbing it down, that, you know, on the website, we need to have very clear information about, you know, the reason the police department is the largest part of our budget is because they have X number of employees
Right.
versus X number of employees in the fire department.
Right.
And then really, you know, just the simple fact of we are required by state law to have a balanced budget. I don't think everybody even knows that. So, I mean, I certainly didn't know it until I was elected to city council and did my first budget. So, yeah.
I'm like, okay, I mean.
That's hard to do, I know.
But for me, it's hard to not, I mean, a lot of this, it's.
You know it,
it's-
I
I'm
know,
like,
I
well, Of
know.
course, everybody knows all
But
this. I mean,
it-
obviously, the police department's the biggest. I mean, the police officer.
I think taking it a step further, it's like, why do you need that many police officers, right? Because I mean, it's a lot of police officers and I'm not, whatever,
Right.
but like, we're such a small town, I think telling that story further, like it costs us much money, but then this is why we have it. And like you tie them to the different, you know, strategic points, like, what does that mean for the community? Because we have this increased community resource, how does that benefit you as a citizen? You know?
I think that came about as part of our budget process a couple of years ago of asking these questions of, and then learning through that process of, well, they need X number of officers on shift at any time and X number of officers.
We know that,
Yeah,
but not everybody knows.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe that's something we could put like in the newsletter under every, you know, that goes out the newsletter. Kind of doing an article about, you know, why we have the number of police officers we have, why we have the number of firefighters we have. and-
You could just do one for, you know, one little part of it at a
Yeah.
time.
Maybe we have those extra ones there.
Even the Citizens Academy course. And not as.
I was thinking, I was thinking the same thing.
I learned a lot going through that about all the things the police department does, all the things the fire department does. It's not just putting out fires and crime, but there are other things that they do. And I didn't know that, a lot of that either, before I went through the Citizens Academy. So maybe getting some of that information out there more publicly and more accessible to people.
By the way, we are thinking, just a little preview here, about changing the name of the Citizens Academy to like Maplewood 101.
Oh,
We think it's a little more inclusive.
Maplewood for dummies.
Because I did ask if children
That's
can
not
attend,
true.
because I think my child is like attending, so.
Not sure citizens is the most inclusive.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Residents Academy sounds,
Maplewood, one.
there's no flair.
So, Just FYI.
I love that. Well, we've kind of started to dip our toes a little bit into what services provided by the city do you value. A little bit about what some of those services are. Which ones do you value?
Snow plowing.
Oh, yeah. I was bragging. I was bragging.
We didn't have so many neighbors that leave their cars on.
Some of
I
us
do,
don't
I'm
have
kidding.
If I had a bigger driveway, Maplewood was designed for it.
Uh,
already
You'll
had
see, it's not
complaints.
you,
I can put a
it's
lot
not
of
you,
cars
it's
in front of
fine.
my house. I've already had complaints. Don't worry. Get around the corner, no. Think of it as a
Did they
big
widen it though? It seems better now. so.
little bit, about 4 inches. No, so I've been parked my Suburban there for a long time. It's like a big planter in the middle of the street. It's great.
That you can't see around when you go around that corner.
Just take your time.
Every neighborhood who has one, I have Just Jesus right out in front of my house every day. Giant fan. Just Jesus.
The snow plowing.
Snow plowing is where we started. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly.
I think that,
where we ended up.
I think our city is really clean. I think our public
Yeah.
works
Yeah,
department does a
sure.
very good job
That's so
on
good.
keeping it clean, I think. And I think I hear a lot of people talk about that and value that.
Yeah, I mean, Public Works.
Yeah.
Really helps define what other people see
Mhm.
when they come to Maplewood. So I think it's important to make sure they're well funded to have the equipment. I know we bought a lot of equipment over the last couple of years. But, yeah,
We use it.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, they
use
use
They
it.
use the heck out of it. Great.
Usually We're not contracting out, which I like.
Yes, yes.
House.
But yeah, that and keeping it's it is a service. The people who mow the lawns for us need to be top notch because it makes a huge difference, like with the railroad tracks and stuff. They're not maintained like they were from a few years ago. Grass gets really high at the curb and it just looks awful.
I like our programming. I've missed like the past couple of events where like always hurts my heart. Just like, I love the coffee prom. I love the sweet tooth tour. So,
But you find that is the thing that most non-Maplewoodians love about Maplewood.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we are.
I think the parks too, I mean, it's not like a service per se, but like today after school, it was so nice out and like my daughter and her friends like went to Sutton Park and they hung out there, like it's a clean, nice space that it's nice that they have a lot of those.
One of our parks.
One of the things I really appreciate
no,
Okay.
sorry.
is our
resident.
is our inspectors.
Yes.
I've gone out with them and I think about those who are in some of our apartments that aren't kept up. And, some of them that maybe have cockroaches or that aren't updated from a health and safety standpoint. And they go out there and, they make sure that the landlords are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I really value the fact that out there policing that. And putting those in,
Not necessarily a service, but I really value accessibility.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the citizens are very protective.
Yeah.
They usually never think it's an investment. We have to pay for good people. So that's a way to justify that. is,
Yeah,
you know.
and foster a culture. of learning.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when people say, well, why do we
Please,
pay people so
please,
much? It's
you're
like, because we call them on Saturday. Answer. That's great.
Other services we want to call out.
I think the community resource officers, they've really made a big difference in the community in the last couple of years. I think it's really changed how people feel about their relationship with the police department.
So the next question is about which services need more investment, which ones need less investment. We'll point out that the services we all really started with are largely public works.
It's a hard one because it's like, I guess for me, knowing about our budget, like how much do we have to invest without taking away from the things that we already like? But our streets and our sidewalks certainly is always a battle.
the traffic study will give us some solutions.
Can't wait for that.
Manchester.
Last time I tried to start that conversation, I got threatened and yelled at. and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So it should be pretty, there's no one's gonna make fun. One way or- Oh, yeah, we're gonna hear
Speed bumps all around.
Oh.
it. Everybody switch on, you know? Let me get all brick.
What'd you say, Beth?
Speed bumps all around.
Yeah, I did give us Anthony's gonna give us that stop sign there, so I don't get hit off Arbor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's no, yeah, he's gonna set it, yeah. I mean, I guess you guys have to approve it, so please put a stop sign in, so there's some, or a yield or something, so I don't get hit by a car.
That's an awful, that viaduct is just. I can't-
No, it's right at, not at Arbor, sorry, at, on Cherry.
Oh,
There's
Cherry,
nothing.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
almost
yeah,
been- 'cause, you know, it was fine when they shut Arbor down to redo it, there was no traffic, but now that they're going the train every time.
Yep, no, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, currently, I know we don't really have the money, but I think everything is not working as intended. Like you guys brought up the survey, as pointed out, that we're actually doing pretty good with the dollars that we bring in. Run a tight ship. So, we're pretty happy about it. It's great, they actually able to, you know, I have 3 employees. Social services. So that's huge for us. We've been using that for a long time. And I just in general, I think our police department has made a pretty big turnaround just in terms of their general attitude, I think, towards constituents. Probably thank the leadership for that, so. But yeah, in general, every time I've had to do it, it's much different than it was 5 or 10 years ago. Much different.
Any other thoughts about investment? And I do appreciate your point there about like, maybe we're doing okay.
Yeah.
I would double down with those streets comment. Maybe that's just because I live on one of the crappier streets in town. But,
I think we're doing them as fast as we can, monetarily.
we just.
Well, that's the problem, right? And that's when you get to the question of, where, you know, what can you take from to put more in that? Like, what do you got? Do you value something else less than that? But it's a hard one, but yeah.
Well, I always think too about like,
Your
what is
street,
it?
it is, you're right, it is awful.
Yeah.
They tear it up every year.
I mean, rust falls off my Suburban as I go down the street. It's crazy.
It's so bad.
You're depressed.
I'm not been sleeping. on it.
All right, the final question for our breakout is how would you characterize your value of services for taxes paid?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly sales tax. Here we go.
Box it out.
But those are different. That's a different question, Sandy. Let's take that up with Jake Zimmer. Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's great. I would say that. As someone who's lived here a long time, I've seen a lot of good work done with my tax dollars.
Yeah, I've been there since 2000.
2003,
Yeah.
4.
Huge. Huge difference.
Wait, no, that's longer. Wait, I was 2004. I've been here 19. Oh, yeah. I'm gonna be married 20 years.
April, I bought my house in March of 2000.
Next year will be 30 years.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, because my son he was born in May of 2000. So, and of course, a week after we moved in, my wife had a head-on collision on Harbor.
Was there a car parked there that you could?
I was a 16-year-old, like an old Delta 98, it's like a big slam yacht. Thank God she was in the Honda at the time, but she was pregnant and had my 4-year-old and then my 6 or 7-year-old in the backseat. Totaled the car. But they were, well, they had CAT scans and stuff. And if it's gonna be like this,
I'm outta here.
Stack of bricks, and everybody was speeding up there. And yeah, it's a whole story. That's why I was always into the speed bumps, because I knew I couldn't stop the number of cars. That doesn't really kill people, it's the speed of cars. that kills people. So,
What about, this end of the table, value of taxes for services rendered?
I think it's great.
say 9 out of 10.
In agreement. I think.
Okay. Any final comments from the group, for the go of the group?
No, but while we were talking, going back to the very beginning, we said, how do we get people to show up to this? My brain works this way. I just wrote down disco budget party question.
Yeah.
I'd be.
And what I mean by that, I don't mean an
I'd
actual
love a good
disco. I
disco.
mean, can we make budgeting fun somehow?
Oh.
I thought I had been.
I will.
Cocktails and budgets. I don't know.
This is not as sexy, but when we did just a town hall, we had dinner
That's what I'm saying.
provided. I brought my kids and they did childcare, so people could come with their kids and so I think those are ideas too, if you're gonna do it during like a dinner time.
I'm half teasing, but I'm in the business of
I
getting
would
people to
still
show up.
offer my children up as a
Food and
community
drink,
service.
people. show up for
I
food.
know. It's just
That's such a great idea, though.
I know it costs money. I know.
She would always gonna weigh it, right? Yeah.
Food and booze always bring people. in.
I'm not sure, yes, but I'm not sure that part can.
That would be a big use of my tax dollars.
There were treats, there were
Yeah,
treats, there were treats. And so it was nice, because there's
I'd
a
go
fair number
anywhere
of people
for
that brought their
free
kids.
cake, so I'll be honest.
What?
I'll go anywhere for free cake.
Yes,
No matter what
cake,
it is,
yes.
I'll sit through it.
And Schnucks has pretty good cake, so.
Yeah, I like that idea. Because I bet also we could think about, would a local business donate a $20 gift card for a raffle?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Okay.
add a little pizzazz.
A little pizzazz.
Pizzazz.
I'm bad at
Matching
pizzazz. I
t-shirts.
just know you need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matching t-shirts, a fun chant, a song.
Don't go to the.
Yeah, well.
Oh, I want t-shirts.
Just drum
Just the
circle.
council members that say,
Yeah.
got
I
budget or
survived the
something, or
town
just
hall
something.
budget.
Yeah, I went to the town hall budget and all I got was a stupid t-shirt.
Oh, I hear that. I
Yeah.
hear that everywhere. Just an idea.
Or
I'll put
arrows,
Craig
I'm
on it.
stupid. Or I'm stupider than this guy.
He understands the budget.
Yeah.
All right, final thought? Any comments for the good of the group?
I think the purpose of summarizing is really for all the other groups, I think. I don't know whether we need to do that because we're all here. So, Are there any additional comments?
Are we going back on Zoom for additional questions or comments?
There's nobody else.
We've never stopped it.
Yeah, we never stopped.
Yeah,
Never stopped, so all this is recorded.
Okay,
And hopefully Karen will.
Is there any?
well, I would like to take a moment to make a pitch for a new budget.
Sure.
There's an
Now's a good
opportunity to do that. I come to you as a private citizen, but I think you also know that I serve on the Planning Commission. And we are developing a fairly ambitious agenda to really meaningfully move the needle forward on housing affordability and housing stabilization. In order to do that, we need some guiding documentation for what our goals and objectives are in that process. Typically, the city would use its comprehensive plan to engage in that work. Some of you may know that our comprehensive plan was originally developed about 40 years ago and was last updated in 2018. So this really creates a framework that governs all of our land use and helps planning and zoning and design and the board make decisions. We are kind of in a space of we think we know how to make those informed decisions. We think we know what the community wants. We think we know what council wants, but without any kind of guiding documentation to really assert that. Essentially, the last comprehensive plan advocated for gentrification. And we got there. So we know these kinds of documents work because they frame the kind of decision making that gets made. So in looking at strategic pillar number 5, community wellness, this is a process that could typically fit within that zone. But I think given all the other plans and studies that are occurring, we're probably running up against some limitations in what could be allocated. But essentially what we're really lacking in that planning process is community feedback and local level data. The things that we really just don't to inform a reform. So if there is an opportunity to consider some third-party support around those items in particular, we're fortunate to have a very active planning and zoning commission with members who are willing to invest a lot of their time in helping to move this planning process forward, not unlike what we've seen with sustainability, where that chair was essentially written. But I think outside support, particularly collection and analysis, would be really helpful. So I expect you'll hear from planning and zoning officially on that account as we get closer to budgeting. There is something that can support our goal of having a more diverse. and
No one's speaking for everybody. I suspect there's lots of support for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got my full support.
There's a very similar, excuse me, sorry. Colin Bissett sent in just a couple hours ago. If you can weigh in via the website, he wasn't able to make it tonight. And so he basically made a pitch that's very similar to the Cambridge just advanced.
I told you, we're a very active commission.
That's great. That's great.
So certainly give that consideration.
There's good with that. I think it's a good idea. And I think too, like, I'd be curious to see if this would work for planning and zoning, but one of the like pros of the Parks Master Plan is that it makes us more eligible and more competitive for grant funding. And so I'm wondering if, when it comes to all of these plans, including an update to our comprehensive land use plan, like what other doors would that open for us?
Yeah.
You know, it's like the tail of money begets money, which sucks sometimes. We just first put up the money, but like it's obviously something that.
Cool.
Kind of final wrap up comments if I can, if that works.
Yeah.
Amber, you were done, right? Okay. So what we're gonna do is, first of all, there'll be, there's an ongoing, there'll be an after action survey that'll be on the website. So anyone can weigh in through that vehicle. The link will be ongoing for additional questions and comments on the website. Obviously, the recording will be posted on the city's YouTube. A summary of this meeting will be available. We'll distribute that, put that online. So people that weren't able to participate, and you can also review it for yourself. So we'll make that available. And that also will be helpful as we go through the budget process. And then our next step in the budget is on February the 28th in this room. Also through Zoom, of course, is going to be the strategic budget priority work session, where council can identify priorities as well from 6 to 7:30. That will be before a council meeting. So that will be from 6 to 7:30, Tuesday, February 28th. And then we will soon have our council budget process in place. Departments go before council between March and May. We'll have that in place soon. So I'll be looking for that. That's kind of the next steps. Appreciate everyone's time this evening.
Yeah, and by the questionnaire, make sure you put a link to the video and maybe suggest watching some of the town hall that we have. You know, before answering the questions, because we'll see all of her numbers. You know, some comments from the council. So.
That's a good idea. For sure Laura can figure out how to do that. Thank goodness for Laura, that's why we have her. Hang out for a minute.
Ending early, 7:23.
Okay. Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for doing it.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Yes.